Hey everyone, how we doing? I'm hot. It's hot out today, but I mean that's just the reality of Northeast Oregon for every summer day. And I'm here to show you how to make prickly lettuce and or wild lettuce tincture. Now I'm working with prickly lettuce because she's who's growing all over the land here, but she is the cousin of wild lettuce. They're interchangeable in the way that they have the same properties and abilities. And the property that we're after when we're making this tincture is her latex. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a bunch of white goo coming out of there, and that's what we're wanting to catch. So within that latex, she has some pain-killing properties that are very similar to like opiates, except for it's not actually an opiate. It's not addictive. It just hits the same receptors in your brain that relieve pain and anxiousness and like insomnia and things like that. And we're going to use alcohol to catch that. Now, a lot of people have, ever since watching my, well, they always ask me about wild lettuce and stuff. I did a get to know me video in the wild, you know, like a meet prickly lettuce in the wild video, and people were like, how do I make a tincture? How do I make a tincture? When I look online, it's so complicated, and I need like a blender and all this equipment and all these different things, and there's all these steps. No, it doesn't have to be that complicated. There's no reason to make it that complicated. They're just, yeah, I'm going to show you how easy this is. So you find yourself your prickly lettuce or your wild lettuce, and you make sure you make a proper ID. Take yourself a good pair of scissors. These are bone cutting scissors because these little scissors that I got from my kids, who I'm going to make fun of them later because these are child scissors and they're teenagers. I'm like, what the fuck, why don't you have real scissors? Because I didn't want to walk down to the apothecary because it's really hot out to grab my own. So bone cutting scissors out of my gathering pack. These work so well for thick branches. And so basically all I'm going to do to make it look like I really know what I'm doing here. When you get to the leaves, fuck, it didn't even go in the jar. Oh, I'm gonna cut it and some of it's gonna end up in the jar. You're just gonna cut her up. Just give her a good little cut. Now I cut her up a little bit more than other plants, but I'm not gonna take a blender out. I'm not gonna pulverize her. I'm not gonna make it to the point where, and you are gonna get poked. So wear gloves if you're adverse to getting poked a little bit. She's not too bad, but she's a little pokey. I'm just gonna give it a bit of surface space, and so when you're chopping it up like this, you're giving the alcohol more ability, more space to extract from. There's a little bird feather on there. Don't worry, this is a personal tincture. I'm not giving this to anybody else, so if there's some bird feather in it, it'll be all right. So basically, even the bone scissors struggle a little bit with the bigger stems, but you want those stems in there for sure. You're just gonna cut her up. It's really simple. It's just like you're catching the latex property out of milky oats or out of California poppy. It's not really any different, so there doesn't need to be any like super complicated steps when you're working with fresh plant matter and 100 proof vodka. I'm not gonna lie, it is really hot out here. We're in the middle of a heat wave. I live in the mountains, so like I'm higher elevation, so usually it's a little cooler up here, and it's only like, I don't know, it's like 9:30 in the morning, and it's the better part of 102 out already. I'm like, my brain is just melting in the heat, but I gotta get this tincture done. Because, you know, when you work with fresh plant matter, you can't say, oh, well, I'll wait till fall when it's cooler outside. Or, you know, and so you gotta make hay while the sun is shining, basically. So, yeah, you're just gathering your plant matter, cutting it up into a jar, super tactfully and beautifully. As long as it gets in there. Now, I like to get her, you notice I'm to the bloom part now. I prefer to work with prickly lettuce or wild lettuce before she blooms. Some people say to work with her after she blooms. Some people say to work with her before she even sends up bloom stalks. Some people say to work with her after she's gone to seed. There's like an internet fight about it. You know, whatever your preference is, I personally have tried all of them. I like it, but just before she goes to bloom, before she opens up all the way. I just find that's when her latex seems to be the most present, and that makes sense because she's pushing up into these blooms trying to get ready to do her thing, you know. After blooms come seeds, and then I probably wouldn't use her after she's gone to seed, because at that point she's not paying attention to her entirety, she's just paying attention to developing her seeds, you know. And so it only takes a plant or two. These ones are smaller. I might be able to use the littler kid scissors. Okay. Maybe not. Maybe it'll just be really easy if I use the bone scissors. Okay. The most important thing when you're making a tincture is to allow yourself to be hilariously human. To not think that you have to be perfect about it. If you get out there and you're like, oh, she's blooming, can't make a tincture now, try anyways. If you're like, well, mine hasn't even gone to bloom, can't make a tincture yet, try anyways. You can if you want to, you know. And even when she goes to seed, I think that's when she's the least effective. Try anyways. You know, like I've got some oregano here, just growing everywhere. She's wild all over the property. And generally people say, harvest her for food before she goes to bloom. I'm gonna harvest a bunch probably the next few days or so, even though she's gone to bloom. You know, just allow yourself to be human. So, you want to pick a jar that you can fill up all the way with your plant matter. You can pick a really big jar if you want, like a half-gallon jar, or even a gallon jar. Sometimes I use these big 3-gallon stainless steel drums for down in my apothecary. But whatever you use, make sure that you have enough plant matter to fill it up. So you notice I didn't really pack it in there. I gave her a good bit of chopping. My hand's all sticky from latex now, so if you don't like sticky things on your hands, you might want to wear some gloves. Now I'm going to take my 100-proof vodka and I'm going to pour it over top. Now the reason I really don't like to pack it tight, super tight, is because you want room for alcohol to exist. I've seen people they pack their jar as tight as they can, chopping it up, and they pour over a little bit of alcohol. When they go to press it out, even if they use like a tincture press or something, they only end up with like 1/4 of a cup or 1/2 a cup of alcohol, and they're like, oh. And I'm like, well, you don't leave any room for your alcohol. So just make sure you don't pack it down too tight. Now you'll see that I pretty much filled it up to the top. Now that's important because something happens if you leave a lot of air in there, and it's called oxidation. And it's not the end of the world if you've made a tincture and you left some air in there and you're like, oh my god, it's not gonna kill you or make your tincture go bad. Oxidation is just like when you take a bite of an apple or a banana and you leave it out and it goes brown. Basically the oxygen is just hitting that the cellular structure of those plants, damage them a little bit. What happens in a tincture is that it tends to make it go a little darker. Your alcohol will go a little darker when it's extracting. I mean, but sometimes that's just the color of a tincture depending on what you're making. And generally just it makes it a little bit weaker, but it's not the end of the world. But you can avoid it by just filling it up to the top. And sometimes if you're using a drier plant, and this won't apply with wild lettuce or prickly lettuce because she's pretty wet. If you're using a drier plant, you want to go back and check the next day, because sometimes it'll absorb that alcohol and you'll have a gap there that you didn't have before. But with wild lettuce, you're just going to cut her up, put the vodka on top, and now you're going to stick a label on there. Write on it what it is and what date you did it. That way a year from now when you remember you made it, you know who it is. And I get asked this a lot. Oh, I forgot I made this tincture 3, 4, 5 years ago. Is it bad? No, not as long as your cap is on tight, because vodka doesn't go bad. It doesn't go bad. And so as long as it's still there, brewing away, after a real long time, eventually your lid might start to corrode, but it'll be a long time out. You hear the June bug? They like the heat. That's what gets them off. And so to hear that one right in my ear, it's like, did you know that it's hot outside? Oh, I hadn't noticed, June bug. Thank you for telling me. They're the sound of summer and made my eye twitch. So now that you've poured vodka over top, you're just gonna sit this in a cool, dark place for 6 to 8 weeks, and that whole time it's gonna be extracting out those latexes. And when you remember that it's been there for like 3 months, what you're gonna do is you're gonna strain the plant material out and then use this tincture as needed. Generally, with prickly lettuce, she's not an everyday one. She's where you're like, oh, I'm really having some back pain, or I'm struggling with sleeping, so I'm going to use a little bit of prickly lettuce to help myself. But it's not something like every single day I'm going to take prickly lettuce. And you'll know when you've taken too much, generally because you start to feel gross. But she's best used as needed. And so again, that was so simple. It doesn't need to be complicated. There's no need to overcomplicate these things, especially when you're working with fresh plant matter and 100 proof vodka. Now, I like 100 proof vodka because she's 50% water, 50% alcohol, which means your tincture is ready to go. It's balanced. When you extract this, you don't have to do any math. You don't have to add any water. There's no complications. It's ready. It's ready. And that's why I really, really love and really advise working with fresh plant matter and 100 proof vodka. Plus you get her water soluble properties. Most of the time when I see people have a bad reaction to a tincture, if it isn't to do with having like an intolerance to the plant, generally it's because somebody used dried plant matter and grain alcohol, which doesn't mean it's made out of grains. It means it's like 190 proof, so it's like 95% alcohol, which means you're missing all of your water soluble properties that are in a plant. And parts of her latex are water soluble too, so you're really missing out if you don't use 100 proof vodka and fresh plant matter. But the most important thing that June bug is just like in my ear, and I don't mind June bugs. I just don't like it when, like, I'm pretty sure if I looked I could find her in the tree and she's looking specifically at me all, can you hear me? She's calling out for somebody. It's actually probably a boy. But anyhow, you're smart enough to do this, even with things going funny and bugs screaming in your ear and just, oh my God, it's hot out here. You can still do this. You are still smart enough to do this. It's so simple. You just have to trust yourself. You have to realize that everything you learn is valid. You don't have to pay somebody thousands of dollars to retain this knowledge. If you make a prickly lettuce tincture, you made a prickly lettuce tincture. That's it. You're smart enough. You did it. You did it. And what you made was valid. It exists. Oh, that's a monarch butterfly. I'm all distracted today. You don't have to pay money to make this exist. You don't have, well, I mean, you gotta pay for vodka. But, like, you know, you don't have to pay to make the knowledge valid. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna get out of here. It's too hot for me to think straight. But you're smart enough, you're smart enough, you're smart enough. Get out there, get curious, and do these things. If you like my videos, even when I'm like, oh, shiny thing, oh, bug, all over the place, make sure to like, turn on notifications, subscribe, comment, share. If you're watching me on YouTube, come find me on Instagram. If you're watching me on Instagram, come find me on YouTube. I share all kinds of real human stuff. I don't have a filter. I don't redo things. I'm like, well, that's how it ended up. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.